Today we are reading chapter 4 of the Gospel of John in our Bible reading challenge for July. In this chapter, we see the first of 7 I am sayings that Jesus uses. And we also see the second miraculous sign that he performs. These are important because it reveals that Jesus is divine, he is God, and not just any other ordinary person. The importance of the I am sayings is sort of a reference to when Moses stands in the presence of God in front of the burning bush when he's called to deliver the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. And Moses asks God and is asking, how will the people know that it is you who have sent me? And God responds and then reveals for the first time in history his very name. And he says, I am who I am. And he's saying, sort of, if you translate it, it's I am Yahweh. I am Jehovah. I am Yahweh. And Jesus then takes that and he then echoes and saying, well, I am God. And this is significant in proving that Jesus is the one who takes away the sins and God is the one who initiates this act of grace. But in the fourth chapter of the Gospel, the I am saying and the second sign is somewhat juxtaposed in how it's presented and how it sort of tells the story of how people accept the Gospel, the good news of God, of Jesus Christ. And I think that we often perceive God's revelation as quite dogmatic. That God says, well, I am this and you have to conform. But actually, I think that God often reveals himself in context, in a way that is incarnational and missional. And these are concepts that are actually need to be unpacked because they reveal themselves a set of values that is actually really amazing when we think about God's intentions to save the world, his willingness to go and to be among us. So Jesus then, in fact, does go. He goes from Jerusalem in Judea up to his home region in Galilee. And there were basically two routes that he could follow. The most direct one was through Samaria, or their preferred route was to bypass Samaria, because Samaria, where the Samaritans lived, was a group of people that were discriminated against by the Jews for looking down upon them for being this sort of mixed Jewish race who didn't worship in Jerusalem. They had a sort of hybrid form of Judaic religion. And it's quite evident in this passage that the Jews do not like the Samaritans. And the fact that Jesus goes to this region and he sits down and he talks to a Samaritan woman goes to show that Jesus is, in fact, not discriminating. He is crossing the boundaries. He is doing that what is considered to be taboo because he cares. He's quite compassionate. He's empathetic. And he longs to show mercy. And he's quite comfortable with the presence of that woman there, and he's comfortable with her story. He is not condemning her for her seemingly failures. And that's the good news. And it affirms what we've read in the previous chapters, that he then presents the gospel message of himself to her and saying, there's coming a time when worship will transcend any place because God, the Messiah, I am here. And you can see me, you can touch me, and you can have a conversation with me, you can have a relationship with me. And he says that, well, worship will be spirit and truth, not in a mechanical way. And these concepts of spirit and truth is embodied in the person of Jesus, and it's something that we can emulate. It's not just attributes, it's more. The truth is a person. It's sort of, Jesus shows how a divine order can make things right. And in the second part of the chapter, in the very last end, Jesus then arrives in Galilee and his seemingly own people, the Jews, do not worship in spirit and truth, and they have a much more political view of what the Messiah ought to be in terms of their own social aspirations. And so we see that their moral triumphalism, their preference and pride is actually a barrier to the truth. And they just want to see signs and miracles. But in fact, Jesus says to a person who comes to him and asks for the healing of his son, that just go. You don't have to see this to believe. And that's in fact what happens. And this is the good news. And I think that it affirms this notion that what Jesus just said to the woman at the well, that she worship in spirit and truth is a very personal, very deep, emotional, spiritual act when we connect to God. And the application for us is that people have real needs, social, but particularly spiritual longings and needs. And they can ultimately only be fulfilled in Jesus Christ. And whatever we are facing, whatever you are facing, and the spiritual needs that you might have, know that Jesus is available and longs and wants to fulfill those needs because he loves you. So let me know how you feel when you read this chapter.